The desert wind howled across the barren landscape, carrying with it the sting of sand and the promise of another merciless day. Sarah McKenna stood at what remained of her homestead, her calico dress torn and stained with soot, watching the last wisps of smoke curl from the charred timbers that had once been her home. Everything was gone. The small cabin her late husband Thomas had built with his own hands, their few possessions, the daguerreotype of their wedding day, all consumed by flames in the night. She had awakened to the acrid smell of smoke and the crackling roar of fire eating through the dry wood. By the time she'd stumbled out into the darkness, clutching only the clothes on her back, it was too late. Whether it was a knocked-over lantern or something more sinister, she couldn't say. The isolation of their small ranch meant no neighbors for miles. No help coming. The sun climbed higher, a blazing eye in the cloudless sky. Sarah knew she couldn't stay here. With no shelter, no water save what trickled from the nearly dry well, and no food, death would come swift in this unforgiving land. She gathered what little she could salvage, a half-burnt blanket, a dented tin cup, a knife that had fallen clear of the flames, and wrapped them in the blanket to carry. Which direction to go? The nearest town, Millbrook, lay 2 days' walk to the east, but even if she made it there, what then? She had no money, no kin, and a widow without means was barely better than a beggar. The mountains to the west promised water and shade, but also danger. That was Apache territory, and the newspapers were full of stories about raids and massacres. Sarah touched the simple gold band on her finger, the only thing of value she still possessed. Thomas had been gone 6 months now, taken by fever. She'd tried to keep the ranch going alone, but it had been a losing battle even before the fire. Maybe this was God's way of telling her it was time to let go. She started walking west, away from the rising sun that already burned her fair skin. The mountains seemed impossibly distant, blue shadows wavering in the heat haze. Each step kicked up small puffs of dust. Her boots, made for housework, not hiking, began to pinch and rub. By midday, her water was gone. The landscape stretched endlessly, scattered brush, towering saguaro cacti, red rock formations that looked like the bones of ancient giants. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals. Sarah envied its freedom, its ability to simply fly away from this desolation. She found meager shade beneath a rocky overhang and collapsed, her legs trembling. The thirst was becoming unbearable, her tongue thick and dry. She closed her eyes, trying to remember the taste of cool water, the feel of rain on her face. When she opened them again, she saw something that made her heart freeze. Horse tracks, fresh ones, no more than a few hours old, and beside them, the print of a moccasin. Apache. Every horror story she'd heard flooded back. The family 3 counties over found dead in their barn. The cavalry patrol that never returned from patrol. The kidnapped women who were never seen again. Sarah's hands shook as she gripped the knife, though she knew it would be useless against warriors who could put an arrow through a man's eye at 50 paces. She forced herself to stand, to keep moving. But which way? The tracks led northwest, toward a cluster of red sandstone pillars. If she went another direction, she might avoid them, but she might also wander deeper into the desert and die of thirst. The sun was sinking toward the horizon when she saw him. He stood atop a boulder 50 yards away, silhouetted against the flame-colored sky, tall and lean, with long black hair held back by a cloth headband. He carried a rifle, though it rested easy in his hands, not pointed at her. Yet, Sarah's knees nearly buckled. She stood frozen, waiting for the arrow or bullet that would end her miserable journey. The Apache warrior, for what else could he be, studied her with dark eyes that gave away nothing. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30 years. His face was angular, weathered by sun and wind, with a scar along one cheekbone. They stood there, 2 figures in the vast emptiness, as the shadows grew longer. Then, without a word, he turned and disappeared behind the rocks. Sarah's legs gave out. She sank to the ground, shaking. Why hadn't he killed her? Was he going to bring others? She knew she should run, but she had no strength left. The sun touched the horizon, painting the world in shades of blood and gold. She must have dozed, because suddenly he was there, standing before her. Up close, she could see the intricate beadwork on his moccasins, the silver conches on his belt. He held out a water skin. Sarah stared at it, then at him. His expression remained unreadable, but he made a small gesture with the water skin. Drink. Her thirst overcame her fear. She grabbed the skin and drank deeply, the water warm but blessed. When she tried to hand it back, he shook his head and pointed to her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse. He tilted his head slightly, as if the words meant nothing to him. Then he turned and began walking toward the red pillars. After a few steps, he paused and looked back at her. The message was clear: follow or stay here and die. Sarah struggled to her feet. What choice did she have? She was already dead to the world she'd known. Whether this Apache killed her quickly or the desert killed her slowly, the result would be the same. At least he had water. She followed him into the gathering darkness, into the unknown, leaving behind the ashes of her old life. The stars began to emerge, countless and indifferent, as they always had been in this hard land. And somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled its lonely song to the night. Sarah's consciousness swam back slowly, like rising from deep water. She lay on something soft, a blanket. Her body ached, but the terrible thirst had eased. Firelight danced on stone walls. She was in a cave. Memory rushed back, the Apache, following him into the darkness, her legs giving out again as they climbed into the rocky hills. She must have fainted. She turned her head and saw him sitting cross-legged by the fire, cleaning his rifle with practiced movements. He had removed his headband, and his hair fell loose past his shoulders. The firelight threw shadows across his angular features, making him look both younger and ancient at once. He noticed her movement and set down the rifle. From a leather pouch, he pulled something wrapped in cloth and held it out to her. Sarah struggled to sit up, her head spinning. Inside the cloth was dried meat and some kind of flat bread. Thank you," she said again, taking the food. Her stomach clenched with hunger, but she forced herself to eat slowly. He watched her eat, then spoke. His voice was deep, careful. "You are safe." Sarah nearly dropped the bread. "You speak English?" A slight nod. "Some learn from trading post, from soldiers." His mouth twisted slightly on the last word. "What's your name?" He was quiet for a moment. "They call me Kuruk. Means bear. I'm Sarah." She hesitated. "Sarah McKenna." He repeated it slowly. The Anglo sounds awkward on his tongue. "Sarah." The fire crackled between them. Outside the cave, wind moaned through the rocks. Sarah pulled the blanket, his blanket, she realized, tighter around her shoulders. "Why did you help me?" Kuruk added wood to the fire before answering. "You walk into death. No water, no sense." There might have been amusement in his voice. Like young rabbit in hawk's shadow. Despite everything, Sarah felt her cheeks flush. "I had nowhere else to go. My home burned." "I know. Saw smoke yesterday. Watched you leave." He had been watching her. The thought should have frightened her more than it did. "Your man?" "Dead. 6 months ago. Fever." He nodded as if this explained everything. Perhaps it did. A lone woman in this land was prey. Kuruk rose smoothly and went to the back of the cave. He returned with a gourd and some kind of paste in a small clay pot. He gestured to her feet, confused. Sarah looked down and gasped. Her boots were stained with blood. She hadn't even noticed the pain through everything else. Before she could protest, he knelt and gently removed her boots. Her feet were raw with blisters, some burst and bleeding. His hands were calloused but surprisingly gentle as he cleaned the wounds with water from the gourd. "This will burn," he warned, dipping his fingers in the paste. It did burn, like fire, but a clean fire. Sarah bit her lip to keep from crying out. He worked efficiently, spreading the medicine and then wrapping her feet in strips of soft leather. "Rest now," he said, moving back to his side of the fire. "Tomorrow." We find water, better shelter. We? The word slipped out before she could stop it. He looked at her steadily. You go back to your people. Sarah thought of Millbrook, of the pitying looks and whispered gossip that would follow her. The widow who'd lost everything and spent nights with an Apache. She'd be ruined, treated worse than the saloon girls. I don't know where my people are anymore, she admitted quietly. Something shifted in his expression, so subtle she almost missed it. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition. The fire burned lower. Sarah lay back, exhausted but unable to sleep. Every shadow could be danger. Every sound outside made her tense. Kuruk seemed to sense her fear. Sleep, he said. I watch. Why should I trust you? He considered this. Because you live. Because I gave water when I could take everything. He paused. Because you have no choice. The blunt truth of it should have terrified her. Instead, oddly, it comforted. At least with him, she knew where she stood. Sarah dozed fitfully, waking often, each time. Kuruk was there, alert by the fire or standing at the cave entrance, watching the night. Once she woke to find he had covered her with another blanket. Near dawn, strange sounds outside brought her fully awake. Voices, Apache voices. Her heart hammered as two men entered the cave. They were older than Kuruk, their faces hard and suspicious. They spoke rapidly in their language, gesturing at her. She caught her name, the Apache version of it, and the word white repeated several times. Kuruk responded calmly at first, then more firmly. One of the men, with gray streaking his hair, pointed at Sarah and said something sharp. Kuruk stood, and though he was younger, something in his bearing made the other men step back. The argument continued, growing heated. Sarah understood none of the words but felt the tension like a physical thing. These men wanted her gone, or dead. Kuruk was defending his decision. But why? Finally, the older man spat on the ground and said something that sounded like a curse. Both visitors left, but not before shooting Sarah looks that made her shiver. Kuruk stood at the cave entrance until they were gone, then returned to the fire. His jaw was tight with anger. What did they want? Sarah asked, though she could guess. They say I am fool. Say white woman brings soldiers, brings death. He looked at her directly. They say I should kill you or send you back to die. Sarah's mouth went dry. What did you tell them? I tell them, he paused, searching for words. I tell them the spirit sent you, that I dream of fire and a golden-haired woman before I find you, that to send you away brings bad medicine. Did you dream of me? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. No, but they are superstitious old men. Despite everything, Sarah found herself almost smiling too. So I'm safe. For now, but we cannot stay here. My people move south for winter. These men, they go ahead to scout. We must go different way. He began packing with quick efficiency. Blankets, weapons, food, the precious water skins. Sarah tried to help, but her bandaged feet made her clumsy. As the first light touched the cave entrance, Kuruk shouldered his pack and rifle. He looked at her, and in the growing light she could see uncertainty in his eyes for the first time. I ask one thing, he said slowly. You trust me? Trust enough to follow where I lead? Sarah thought of the ashes of her home, of the empty life waiting in town, of the two Apache men who wanted her dead. Then she looked at this strange, quiet man who had saved her for reasons she didn't understand. Yes, she said simply. He held out his hand to help her stand. His grip was strong, steady. Then we go. Stay close, stay quiet. And tonight, he paused, something flickering in his dark eyes. Stay with me tonight, safer together than alone. The words were practical, logical, but something in the way he said them, the way his hand lingered on hers a moment longer than necessary, suggested meanings beyond safety. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. Together they stepped out of the cave into the cool morning air, into a journey that would take her far from everything she had known, into a world where her very survival depended on this unlikely protector. The sun climbed as they walked, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. And Sarah McKenna, widow, civilized woman, followed an Apache warrior into the wilderness, leaving no trail for her old life to follow. The morning sun was already brutal, turning the landscape into a shimmering furnace. Sarah's feet, despite Kuruk's medicine and bandages, screamed with each step. They had been walking for hours, following paths only he could see through the maze of rock and sand. He moved like part of the landscape itself, his steps sure and silent. Sarah struggled to keep up, her civilized boots clumsy on the rough terrain. When she stumbled for the third time, he stopped and looked back, assessing. "We rest," he said, guiding her to a thin slice of shade beneath an overhanging rock. Sarah collapsed gratefully, her dress soaked with sweat. She watched as Kuruk scanned the horizon, always alert. A lizard skittered across the rocks, and a pair of vultures circled lazily overhead. "Waiting for me to die?" she asked, nodding at the birds. "They are patient," Kuruk said, "but they wait for nothing today." He handed her the water skin. Sarah took a small sip, knowing it had to last. As she drank, she studied him. In daylight, she could see more clearly. The scar on his cheek was from a blade, not battle. His hands, though rough, showed a kind of grace in their movements. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Hidden Spring, 2 days' walk. My people used it before." He paused. "Before soldiers came." There was weight in those words. Sarah had heard the stories. Of course, the Army's campaigns against the Apache, the forced marches, the reservations. But sitting here with this man who had shown her nothing but kindness, those stories took on different meaning. "Your family?" she ventured. His jaw tightened. "Gone. Brother killed at Canyon of Death. Mother, sister taken to San Carlos. Died there of white man's sickness. I'm sorry." He looked at her sharply, as if surprised. "Why? Your people did this." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "They're not my people. Not anymore." She gestured at her situation. "Would my people have me now?" Something softened in his expression. He sat beside her, though still keeping watch. "You are like me, between worlds." They sat in companionable silence until the slice of shade grew too thin. As they prepared to continue, a sound made Kuruk freeze, the distant ring of metal on stone. In one fluid motion, he pulled Sarah behind a boulder, hand over her mouth. His body pressed against hers, tense as a drawn bow. Sarah's heart pounded so loud she was sure it would give them away. Voices carried on the wind, English voices, soldiers. "Tracks lead this way. Sergeant, fresh ones." "Could be our Apache. Johnson said he saw one near the McKenna place before it burned." Sarah's blood went cold. They were looking for Kuruk. Had they connected him to her somehow? "Spread out," another voice ordered. "If he's got the woman, she might still be alive." Kuruk's hand moved from her mouth to his knife. Sarah grabbed his wrist, shaking her head desperately. There were too many. He met her eyes, and she saw him calculate, his life against hers. The footsteps came closer. A shadow fell across their hiding spot. Sarah held her breath. Pressing closer to Kuruk, she could feel his heartbeat, steady despite the danger. Then a shout from further away. "Sergeant! Found something! Looks like they headed into the canyon!" The shadow moved away. Footsteps receded. The voices grew distant. Following false trail Kuruk had laid that morning. They stayed frozen for long minutes after the last sound faded. Finally, Kuruk relaxed slightly, though his hand stayed on his knife. "They look for you," he said quietly. "No, they look for you. I'm just—" Sarah swallowed. "They think you took me." "Did I not?" The question hung between them. Had he taken her, or had she chosen to follow? The distinction seemed to matter less with each passing hour. They traveled more carefully after that, Kuruk choosing paths that left no trace. As afternoon wore on, the landscape changed. The flat desert gave way to broken country, deep arroyos and towering mesas. It was harder going but offered more cover. At a crossing between two ravines, Karuk stopped suddenly. He studied the ground, then the cliff faces around them, his expression grim. "What is it?" Sarah asked. "Others have been here, not soldiers, Apache, but not my clan." He pointed to marks she couldn't read. 3, maybe 4. Hunting party. Is that bad? He considered. Maybe. Some clans take any white for enemy, or for trade. His meaning was clear. She could be killed or sold. They altered course again, climbing higher into rocky terrain. Sarah's legs shook with exhaustion, but she didn't complain. She was learning that complaint was luxury in this world of survival. As the sun began its descent, Karuk found what he was looking for, a shallow cave, really more of a deep overhang. Hidden behind a fall of boulders, a tiny seep of water darkened one wall. "Good shelter," he said with satisfaction. "Old hiding place." While he gathered scrub wood for a small fire, Sarah explored their refuge. In the back, almost invisible, she found old paintings on the rock, stick figures of men and animals, suns and spirals, telling stories she couldn't read. "Your people made these?" she asked when Karuk returned. He glanced at the paintings. "Long before my people, the old ones, they knew how to live with this land, not fight it." As darkness fell, they sat by the small fire. Karuk had trapped a rabbit somehow, and the smell of roasting meat made Sarah's stomach clench. She watched him tend the fire, noticed the careful way he fed it just enough wood to cook, but not enough to smoke. "You saved my life," she said suddenly. "Twice now. Why?" He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "First time I see white woman. I am boy. Soldiers' camp. They had Apache women, prisoners. One soldier's wife. She gave them water, gave them blankets. Soldiers beat her for it." He looked at Sarah across the fire. "She had hair like sunrise, like you." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "What happened to her?" "Don't know. Soldiers moved on. But I remember, she saw people, not enemies." He paused. "When I saw you in desert, I think maybe you are her spirit. Come back." "Foolish thought." "Not foolish," Sarah said softly. "Kind." They ate in silence, sharing the rabbit and the last of the flat bread. The stars emerged, brilliant in the clear air. Sarah had never seen so many, had never felt so small beneath them. "Your husband," Karuk said eventually. "He was a good man." "Yes, Thomas was steady, reliable. He had dreams of making the ranch prosper." She smiled sadly. "He wasn't made for this hard land. Too gentle. Gentle can be strength," Karuk observed. "But not always enough." A coyote called in the distance, answered by another. The sound made Sarah shiver, reminding her how far she was from anything familiar. "Are you afraid?" Karuk asked. "Yes," she admitted. "Of the soldiers finding us, of your people rejecting me, of—" She gestured at the vast darkness around them. "All of this. Fear keeps you alive, but too much fear." He shook his head. "It makes you blind." He rose and checked their surroundings, then returned to the fire. When he sat, it was closer to her than before. "Tomorrow we reach water. After that—" He hesitated. "I cannot go to my people, cannot return you to yours. We must find different way." Together, the word came out more vulnerable than she intended. He looked at her, and in the firelight she saw something shift in his guarded expression. "If you choose. But no, to stay with Apache means to be hunted, to be alone. White world will call you traitor. Apache world will call you enemy." Sarah thought of the soldiers' voices, talking about her like property to be recovered. Thought of the Apache men who wanted her dead. Thought of this man who asked nothing but gave protection. "I've been alone since Thomas died," she said. "Maybe longer, at least with you." She met his eyes. "I'm alone with someone who sees me as more than widow or white woman. You see, just Sarah." The fire crackled. Karuk reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. and touched a strand of her hair that had escaped its pins. His fingers were gentle as he tucked it behind her ear. "Sarah," he said softly, the name still foreign on his tongue but growing familiar. The moment stretched between them, fragile as spider silk. Then he withdrew his hand and stood. "Sleep now. Tomorrow brings challenges enough." But as Sarah settled into her blankets, she felt something had changed. The fear remained, but beneath it was something else. Not hope exactly. Hope was too large a word for this harsh place. But possibility. The chance that two people outside all worlds might make one of their own. The memories came unbidden in the pre-dawn darkness. Sarah lay still, listening to Karuk's quiet breathing across the dying embers, as voices from her past echoed in her mind. "Savages," her father had said, reading from the newspaper at their dinner table in Ohio. "The Apache are the worst of them. No Christian mercy in their hearts. No capacity for civilization. The only good Indian is a dead Indian." Thomas's brother had declared when they announced their plans to homestead in the territory, "You mark my words, Sarah, they'll murder you in your beds." Even gentle Thomas had kept his rifle loaded, had built the house with thick walls and narrow windows. "Just being careful," he'd said, but she'd seen how he watched the horizon, how he startled at unexpected sounds. Now here she lay, protected by one of those very savages, alive only because of his mercy. Karuk stirred as the first light touched the sky. His movements were immediate and alert, no drowsy transition from sleep to waking. He glanced at her, seemed about to speak, then froze. His hand moved slowly to his rifle. Sarah heard it too, horses, several of them, moving through the canyon below. "Stay," he breathed, then melted into the rocks like a shadow. Sarah pressed herself against the cave wall, heart hammering. The horses came closer. She could hear voices now, speaking English. One laugh, rough and careless, sent chills down her spine. "Told you following that smoke would pay off. Apache always have their hiding spots near water. Question is, did he take the woman or kill her? Does it matter? Either way, we get the bounty for him. Government pays same for Apache bucks dead or alive. Bounty hunters." Sarah's stomach turned. She'd heard of them. Men who made their living hunting Apache for the government rewards. Worse than soldiers because they followed no rules of engagement. A figure appeared at the cave entrance. Not Karuk, a white man, bearded and filthy, rifle ready. His eyes found Sarah and lit up with ugly triumph. "Well, well, boys, the Apache's got himself a white woman." Sarah tried to run, but he was on her in 2 strides, grimy hand tangling in her hair. She fought, scratching at his face, earning a backhanded blow that sent her sprawling. "Feisty one," he laughed. "Jackson, Murphy, get up here." 2 more men scrambled up the rocks. Sarah's vision swam, but she saw their faces, predators' faces, without even hate to make them human, just greed and worse hungers. "Where's your Apache buck? Woman!" The bearded one grabbed her chin. "He leave you here like the coward they all are?" Sarah spat in his face. He raised his hand again, but never completed the blow. An arrow sprouted from his throat. He dropped, gurgling, blood spraying across Sarah's dress. The other 2 spun, firing wildly at the rocks. Sarah scrambled for the dead man's rifle, but Murphy kicked it away, grabbing for her. Another arrow took him in the chest. He fell across her, pinning her down with his dying weight. Jackson backed toward the cave entrance, shooting at shadows. "Where are you, you red devil? Show yourself." Karuk appeared like an avenging spirit, knife in hand. The 2 men crashed together, rolling in the dust. Sarah shoved Murphy's body off and searched frantically for a weapon. Any weapon. The fighters separated. Jackson had a bloody slash across his ribs but still held his gun. Karuk circled, knife ready. Blood running down his left arm. "You're worth $500. Apache." Jackson snarled. "More if I bring your scalp." He raised the gun. Sarah didn't think, just threw herself forward, slamming into Jackson's back. The shot went wide. Karuk's knife flashed. Jackson dropped without a sound. Sarah stood shaking, covered in blood, some hers, most not. Karuk swayed, his arm bleeding freely now. She caught him as he stumbled. "Bullet," he said through gritted teeth. "Went through." Sarah tore strips from her petticoat with trembling hands. The wound was ugly, but clean, high on his shoulder. She bound it as best she could while he sat stone-faced, making no sound despite the pain. "We go," he said when she finished. "Others will come." "You can't travel like this." "Must." He struggled to his feet. "They track these men. Find bodies. Find us." They gathered what they could from the dead men ammunition. Food. A better rifle for Sarah. She tried not to look at the corpses. Tried not to think about how easily Karuk had killed. How easily she had helped him. The journey that day was nightmare. Karuk pushed on despite his wound, choosing difficult paths that would discourage horses. Sarah supported him when he would allow it, which wasn't often. His pride, she was learning, ran deep as mountain roots. By afternoon, infection was setting in. His skin burned with fever, though he still refused to stop. Only when he nearly walked off a cliff edge did Sarah revolt. "No more," she said firmly, guiding him to shade. "You'll kill yourself. And then where will I be?" He tried to argue but lacked strength. Sarah gave him water, checked the wound. It was angry red, weeping. She needed medicines she didn't have, knowledge she'd never learned. "The paste," she said suddenly. "The one you used on my feet. Do you have more?" He gestured weakly to his pack. Sarah found the clay pot, along with other items she didn't recognize. Following his halting instructions, she cleaned the wound again, applied the paste, rebound it with fresh cloth. Night fell with them sheltered in a grove of juniper trees. No fire, too dangerous. Sarah cradled Karuk's head in her lap, giving him sips of water when he'd take them. He muttered in his language, lost in fever dreams. "Should have left you," he said during a lucid moment. "Shut up," Sarah said, surprising herself with the vehemence. "You saved me. Now I save you. That's how this works." He looked up at her, eyes bright with fever. "You change." "Yes," she agreed. "I'm changing." The night was endless. Every sound could be pursuit. Every shadow could hide danger. Sarah clutched the rifle, knowing she'd use it if needed. The woman who'd left the burned homestead 3 days ago wouldn't have recognized her. Near dawn, the fever broke. Karuk's skin cooled. His breathing eased. Sarah nearly wept with relief. He woke clear-eyed, took in her exhausted face, the protective way she held the rifle. "You stayed." "Of course I stayed." She helped him sit up. "Drink properly. Though you're lucky I don't shoot you myself for scaring me like that." That ghost smile touched his lips. White woman with Apache spirit. "Maybe," Sarah said. "Or maybe Apache man teaching white woman to survive." He grew serious. "What I teach you, it changes who you are. No going back." Sarah thought of the 3 dead men, of how she'd helped kill them without hesitation, of how she'd tended Karuk all night with single-minded purpose, of how the old rules, the old world, seemed like a dream, fading in harsh daylight. "I know," she said simply. "But going back was never really possible, was it? From the moment I followed you from my burned home, I was already changing. You just showed me how to make the change mean survival instead of death." The sun rose over the mountains, painting the world in fresh colors. Somewhere behind them lay civilization. Soldiers, bounty hunters, all the forces that would see them apart or dead. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, a life neither white nor Apache, but something new. "Can you travel?" Sarah asked. Karuk tested his shoulder, winced but nodded. "To the spring. We need water, and then we keep going," Sarah finished. "Together." He looked at her, really looked, as if seeing her for the first time. Not the terrified widow he'd found in the desert, but the woman she was becoming, strong enough to kill if needed, gentle enough to heal, changed by necessity and choice, both. Together, he agreed. They packed in companionable silence. When Karuk swayed, Sarah steadied him without fuss. When the path grew treacherous, he guided her with patient gestures. Two people finding a rhythm of survival, of partnership born from need but growing into something deeper. The old Sarah would have been horrified at her blood-stained dress, her sunburned skin, the rifle she carried with growing confidence. But the old Sarah had died in a burned homestead. This Sarah, who she was becoming, walked into the new day with steady steps, beside a man who was teaching her that strength came in many forms, and that the space between worlds might be the only place where someone like her could truly live. The hidden spring was paradise after days of rationed water. It bubbled up from rocks in a narrow canyon, feeding a pool fringed with maidenhair ferns and young cottonwoods. Sarah wanted to plunge in fully clothed, but Kuruk's cautious survey of the area reminded her that even paradise could hide serpents. They made camp upslope from the water, concealed among fallen boulders. Over the following days, as Kuruk's shoulder healed, he began teaching her the skills of survival. Not the domestic arts she'd known, cooking, sewing, tending house, but the raw knowledge of staying alive in an unforgiving land. "See here," he said, kneeling by the pool's edge. "Deer tracks, 2 days old. Coyote, fresh this morning. And this." He pointed to a disturbance in the mud. "Man, but not Apache." Sarah studied the boot print. "How can you tell?" "Apache foot moves different, touches earth like friend, not enemy." He demonstrated, his moccasined foot leaving barely a mark. "White man stomps, conquers ground." She thought of her own heavy-heeled boots, now wrapped in cloth to muffle their sound. Everything about her old life had been loud, assertive, claiming space. Kuruk's way was to move through the world like water, leaving little trace. He taught her to read the sky for weather, to find edible plants among the thorns and poison, how to set snares for small game, to clean a kill without waste. Her hands, once soft from housework and protected by gloves, grew calloused and sure. "Fire is life," he explained one evening, showing her how to bank coals to last the night. "But also death if seen by wrong eyes. Learn to make fire that gives heat but no smoke, light but no beacon." Sarah absorbed it all with desperate attention. Each skill mastered was another step away from the helpless woman she'd been. When she successfully trapped her first rabbit, the pride in Kuruk's eyes meant more than any compliment she'd received in civilized society. But it wasn't just practical skills he shared. In the quiet evenings, as stars emerged like scattered diamonds, he told her stories of his people, not the bloody tales she'd heard from newspapers, but stories of ceremony and celebration, of connection to land deeper than ownership. "This place," he gestured to the canyon walls. "My grandfather's grandfather knew it, knew every stone, every path of water. The land doesn't belong to us. We belong to it." "Thomas always talked about taming the land," Sarah said, "making it productive. Cannot tame wind, cannot tame lightning, can only learn to live alongside." He was quiet for a moment. "Your people want to change everything to match their vision. My people learn to change ourselves to match what is." The distinction felt profound. Sarah thought of all the energy she'd spent trying to force the desert to accommodate her Eastern expectations, the failed vegetable garden, the constant battle against dust and heat, fighting a war she could never win. One morning, she woke to find Kuruk sharpening a knife, his movements precise and meditative. Beside him lay a freshly killed deer. "How? I didn't hear anything," she said. "You sleep like the dead," he said with that ghost smile. "But also, I move like shadow. Come, learn to use olive animal. Waste nothing." The lesson was messy, difficult. Sarah's stomach turned at first, but she forced herself to watch, to learn. Life here demanded such knowledge. By the time they finished, she understood that taking a life meant responsibility to honor all it gave. As his shoulder healed, Kuruk began teaching her to shoot properly. Not the panicked firing she'd done at Thomas's urging, but real marksmanship. "Breathe," he said, standing behind her, adjusting her stance. "Rifle is part of arm is part of body is part of earth, all connected." His proximity made concentration difficult. Sarah was acutely aware of his chest against her back, his hands steady on her arms. When had she begun noticing such things? When had his presence changed from threat to comfort to something more? She fired. The tin cup they'd set on a rock 50 yards away jumped and fell. "Good," Karuk said, but didn't step away. Again. Days blended together. Sarah lost track of time, knew only the rhythm of survival and learning. Her skin darkened from the sun. Her body grew lean and strong. When she caught her reflection in the pool, she barely recognized herself. One afternoon, as she practiced starting fire with flint and steel, voices carried up the canyon. Her hands stilled. Karuk materialized beside her, rifle ready. 2 riders appeared below, white men in cavalry uniforms. They watered their horses at the pool, talking casually. "Orders are to check every water source between here and Fort Buchanan. That Apache and the McKenna woman have to be somewhere." "Waste of time. If you ask me, woman's probably dead by now. These Apache don't keep white women alive long." The first soldier spat. "Either way, we find that buck. We end him. Colonel wants an example made." They lingered, watering horses and filling canteens. Sarah held her breath, acutely aware that one glance upward, one dislodged stone, would betray them. Karuk remained perfectly still, but she could feel the tension in him, coiled like a spring. Finally, the soldiers mounted and rode on. Sarah exhaled shakily. "They won't stop," she said. "Will they?" "No, to them. I am Symbol, Apache who took white woman. Cannot let that stand." He looked at her. "I bring you only danger. You bring me life," Sarah said firmly. "Without you, I'd be bones in the desert. Maybe better. Stop." She turned to face him fully. "I'm tired of this. You saved me. I saved you. We've survived together. When will you stop thinking I'm some fragile flower who doesn't know her own mind?" His eyes widened slightly at her vehemence. "You are not fragile. Not anymore. Then stop trying to make my choices for me." She gestured at the canyon, the spring, the vast sky above. "This is hard, dangerous, I know that. But for the first time since Thomas died, maybe for the first time in my life, I feel truly alive. I feel like myself, not someone's wife or someone's charity case or someone's problem to solve." Karuk studied her for a long moment. Then he reached out, touched her face with surprising gentleness. "The woman I found in desert is gone. You have become something new, something between worlds, like me. Is that bad?" "No, it's just lonely, to be between, to have no true home." Sarah covered his hand with hers. "Maybe home isn't a place. Maybe it's—" She struggled for words. "Maybe it's finding someone else who understands what it means to be between." Something shifted in his eyes. He leaned closer, and Sarah's heart raced. But then a hawk cried overhead, breaking the moment. Karuk pulled away. Suddenly all business. "We stay here too long. Soldiers know this spring. We'll come back." He stood. Decision made. Tomorrow we go deeper, into mountains where horses cannot follow easily. That night, as they prepared for departure, Sarah felt a strange mix of excitement and trepidation. Each step took her further from any possibility of return. The woman who'd worn corsets and served tea to church ladies was as dead as if she'd perished in that fire. "I need to tell you something," she said as they banked the fire. "About who I was before. I was proper, respectable. I went to church every Sunday, helped with the Ladies' Aid Society. I never spoke to a man who wasn't my husband without a chaperone. I was everything a good white woman should be." Karuk waited, patient as always. "But I was dying inside." Sarah continued, "Every day, smaller and smaller, fitting into a box others made. When Thomas died, I thought I'd die too. Not from grief, though I grieved, but from emptiness. From being nothing but Widow McKenna, until I faded away entirely. Now you are Sarah who shoots straight, Sarah who makes fire, Sarah who saves Apache warrior from fever. He smiled slightly. Sarah who speaks her mind like war chief. Despite everything, she laughed. Is that what I am? A war chief? Warriors come in many forms. Some fight with arrows, some with words, some with courage to become new person entirely. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and indifferent. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, new challenges. But tonight, in this hidden place between worlds, Sarah felt more herself than she'd ever been. The price of that freedom was high, everything she'd known, everyone she'd been. But sitting here with this man who saw her truly, she couldn't regret the bargain. Teach me to say something in your language, she said impulsively. He thought for a moment. Then, carefully, he spoke a phrase and had her repeat it until she got the sounds right. What does it mean? I walk new path. First words young Apache learns when becoming adult, leaving child ways behind. Sarah repeated the phrase again, feeling its weight. Yes, she thought, I walk a new path, and wherever it leads, I walk it with open eyes. The news came with the wind, carried by a lone Apache scout who appeared like a ghost at the edge of their mountain camp. Karuk spoke with him in rapid, tense words, while Sarah waited, reading trouble in every line of their bodies. When the scout vanished back into the forest, Karuk's face was granite. Soldiers, he said. Many. They sweep through valleys like flood. My people. His voice caught. Small camp near Bitter Creek. Women, children, old ones. Soldiers found them yesterday. Sarah's stomach clenched. Survivors? Few. Scattered. His hands flexed as if gripping invisible weapons. Scout says soldiers look for me specifically. They believe I lead war party, that I took you for... He didn't finish. We have to help them, Sarah said immediately. Karuk looked at her sharply. We? Your people are in danger because of me, because they think you took me. She stood, mind already working. Where are the survivors heading? Sacred Caves, 2 days north. But soldiers follow. And between here and Caves, he shook his head. Open ground, no cover. They broke camp within the hour, traveling hard through terrain that tested every skill Karuk had taught her. Sarah's legs burned. Her lungs ached in the thin mountain air, but she didn't complain. The image of soldiers descending on a peaceful camp drove her forward. On the second day, they heard it, gunfire echoing off canyon walls. Karuk's face went pale beneath sun-darkened skin. Without a word, he began to run. Sarah followed, rifle clutched tight, feet sure despite the treacherous path. They crested a ridge and saw it spread below. A running battle across a sage-dotted plain. A small group of Apache, maybe 20 souls, fleeing toward the rocky hills. Behind them, cavalry soldiers firing from horseback. Even at this distance, Sarah could see children among the fleeing Apache. An old woman stumbled, fell. A young warrior turned back to help her and jerked as bullets found him. No, Karuk breathed. Then, louder. No! He raised his rifle, but Sarah caught his arm. Too far. You'll just give away our position. His eyes were wild. My people die. Then we help them live. Think, where can they make a stand? Karuk forced himself to focus. To see terrain instead of tragedy. Box Canyon. There. One way in. Defenders could hold if they reach it. Then we make sure they reach it. They ran along the ridge, using height to their advantage. Below, the Apache group was losing ground. A woman carrying a baby stumbled. Soldiers were closing. Close enough now that Sarah could see their faces. Young men, following orders, seeing enemies instead of families. Here, Karuk said, dropping behind a boulder. Range is good. Sarah positioned herself beside him, rifle steady. Her hands didn't shake. The woman she'd been would have hesitated, would have seen those soldiers as her people. But that woman had never seen children run from bullets. Horses, Karuk said. Shoot horses. Not men, slows them without killing. It was mercy of a sort. Sarah sighted on the lead horse, breathed as Karuk had taught her. Squeezed. The horse screamed. Went down. Its rider tumbled, cursing. Karuk's rifle cracked beside hers. Another horse fell. The charge faltered as soldiers reined in, confused, looking for the source of fire. "Move," Karuk said. They displaced, found new positions, fired again. The Apache survivors saw their chance, redoubled their efforts toward the canyon. An old man carrying a wounded boy, a young mother dragging 2 children, warriors turning to fire at the soldiers, buying time with their lives. The cavalry officer, Sarah could see his insignia now, was shouting orders. Half his men dismounted, taking cover, returning fire toward the ridge. Bullets whined off rocks, showering them with chips. "They'll flank us," Sarah said. "Let them try. Our people almost there." Our people. When had she begun thinking of them that way? But watching them flee, seeing their desperate courage, she felt it. These weren't savage raiders. They were families, like hers had been. Once, a bullet tugged at her sleeve, close enough to feel its heat. Sarah shifted position, kept firing. Her ammunition was running low, but the Apache were almost to the canyon mouth now. Then she saw him, a sergeant, lining up a shot on the woman with the baby. The woman who'd made it so far, who was steps from safety. Sarah didn't think. Her rifle swung, cracked. The sergeant spun, fell, clutching his shoulder. "Good shot," Karuk said grimly. The last of the Apache disappeared into the canyon. The soldiers, realizing their prey had found defensible ground, pulled back to regroup. Karuk grabbed Sarah's hand. "Now we run. They know where we are." They fled along the ridge as shouts rose behind them. Sarah's dress caught on thorns, tore. Her carefully wrapped boots slipped on loose stone, but Karuk's hand in hers was steady, pulling her forward, keeping her upright when she stumbled. Shots rang out. A bullet sparked off stone inches from Karuk's head. They dropped, rolled behind a fallen log as splinters exploded around them. "Give up, Apache," a voice called. "Send out the woman and we might let you live." Karuk looked at Sarah. She read the thought in his eyes, the calculation, her safety against his life. "Don't you dare," she hissed. "Sarah, I said don't." She checked her rifle. 3 rounds left. "We survived together or not at all." Something fierce and proud flashed in his eyes. "Together, then." They broke cover simultaneously, running in different directions. The soldiers had to split their fire. Sarah felt a bullet pluck at her skirt, kept running. The edge of the ridge loomed ahead, a 20-foot drop to scree and brush. Karuk reached it first, didn't hesitate. He jumped, landed hard, rolled. Sarah followed, dress billowing. A moment of terrifying freefall before impact knocked the breath from her. Strong hands pulled her upright. "Move!" They ran down the scree slope as soldiers appeared at the ridge above. More shots, but distance and dust made them wild. Into the brush they went, thorns tearing cloth and skin, until the sounds of pursuit faded. Finally, Karuk pulled her into a thicket so dense even rabbits would struggle through. They lay gasping, listening. Sarah became aware of pain. Her ankle twisted, palms bloody from the fall. A burning graze across her ribs where a bullet had come too close. "Let me see," Karuk said. She lifted her torn bodice. The graze was shallow but ugly, seeping blood. Karuk's jaw tightened as he used his water to clean it, tore his shirt for bandages. "This is my fault," he said. "Stop it." Sarah caught his hands. "Those soldiers weren't shooting at your people because of me. They were shooting because that's what soldiers do to Apache. I just gave them an excuse. You shot one of them. They will not forget." "Good. Maybe he'll remember that Apache have friends, that someone thinks their lives matter enough to defend." Karuk stared at her. "You would be hunted by your own people, forever outside." "I already am." Sarah touched his face, felt the day's stubble, the warmth and of skin. "When I saw those children running, that mother with her baby, I knew, your fight is my fight now. Your people are my people, not because you saved me, because it's right." He covered her hand with his. "The path you choose has no return. Apache who war against whites die or go to reservation. Those who help them He didn't finish. Then we make a different path. You said it yourself. We're between worlds. Maybe that means we can see what others can't. Find ways. He silenced her with a kiss. Not gentle, not tentative, but fierce with fear and relief, and something deeper. Sarah responded in kind, pouring all her own tangled emotions into the contact. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, the world had shifted again. I should not, Karuk said roughly. I deserve the truth. Sarah interrupted. And the truth is, I've never felt more alive than these weeks with you. Never felt more myself. Never felt more. More what? She took a breath, spoke the word that terrified and thrilled her. Free. He kissed her again. Softer this time. A promise more than passion. When distant shouts reminded them of danger, they pulled apart reluctantly. The caves. Karuk said, My people need help, need medicine, food, need warriors. Then we go to them. Sarah stood, ignoring her injuries. But carefully, the soldiers will expect it. They set out as darkness fell. Two shadows in a hostile land. Behind them lay Sarah's last ties to the white world. She had shot one of her people, chosen a side in a war she'd once ignored. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, a life outside all protection of law or society. But walking beside Karuk through the gathering night, Sarah felt no regret. She had found her place at last, not in any world others made, but in the space between, where love and justice mattered more than the color of skin or the customs of birth. The path was dark, treacherous, with no promise of safe haven at its end. But she walked it with sure steps, beside a man who'd taught her that courage came in many forms, and that sometimes the greatest rebellion was simply to see others as human. The stars emerged overhead, ancient witnesses to the small human dramas below, and somewhere in the darkness, Apache survivors huddled in sacred caves, waiting for dawn and whatever salvation it might bring. The ambush came at dawn, swift and brutal. Sarah woke to rough hands dragging her from their hidden camp. Karuk's warning cry cut short by the butt of a rifle. Through blurred vision, she saw him fall, blood streaming from his temple. Well, the lost widow McKenna. The sergeant she'd wounded stood over her, arm in a sling, face twisted with satisfaction. Thought you turned Apache on us, did you? They bound her hands with rope that bit into her wrists. When she struggled, a soldier backhanded her casually. That's for my shoulder, woman. Where are you taking me? Sarah demanded. Fort Buchanan. The colonel wants to see what kind of white woman shoots at her own kind. He spat near her feet. Though woman might be too kind a word for what you've become. They threw her over a horse like a sack of grain. As they rode out, Sarah twisted to see Karuk stirring, trying to rise despite the blood on his face. Their eyes met across the distance, his dark with anguish, hers trying to convey strength she didn't feel. The journey to Fort Buchanan took 2 days of hard riding. The soldiers treated her like a prisoner of war. No comfort, little water, crude comments about Apache lovers that made her skin crawl. By the time the fort's walls appeared, Sarah was sunburned, dehydrated, and seething with cold fury. They locked her in a storage room that stank of molded grain. Through the small barred window, she could see soldiers drilling, the American flag snapping in the desert wind. Once, that flag had meant home, safety, civilization. Now it felt like a foreign banner. Colonel Morrison was a thin man with cold gray eyes who looked at Sarah like she was something scraped off his boot. Mrs. McKenna, you've caused us considerable trouble. Sarah straightened despite her exhaustion. I've done nothing wrong. Nothing wrong? His voice rose. You've been living with hostiles. You shot Sergeant Palmer. You aided enemies of the United States. He leaned forward. Tell me where the Apache are hiding, and I might show mercy. I don't know what you're talking about. Morrison's mouth tightened. Very well. Perhaps a few days of contemplation will refresh your memory. Guards. They took her to a different cell. This one with stone walls and a single barred window too high to reach. The door slammed with finality. Days blended together. Bread and water twice daily. No blanket against the cold desert nights. No word of Karuk, whether he lived or died. Sarah paced the small space, planning escapes she couldn't execute, wondering if she'd rot here until they decided her fate. On the fourth day, they brought her a visitor. "Sarah? Oh, Sarah, what have they done to you?" Margaret Whitman, the banker's wife from Millbrook, stood in the doorway wearing her finest traveling dress, face pinched with righteous concern. Sarah had helped organize church socials with this woman, had listened to her gossip over tea. "Margaret," Sarah's voice came out rusty, "why are you here?" "To save you, of course." Margaret settled her skirts, keeping distance between them as if Sarah's condition might be contagious. "The whole territory is talking about you. That savage kidnapped you, forced you to... Well, but I told everyone. I said Sarah McKenna is a good Christian woman. She'd never willingly consort with those heathens." "He didn't kidnap me." Margaret's eyes widened. "The ordeal has affected your mind. Of course he did. No proper woman would choose. I chose." Sarah stepped into the light from the barred door. "I chose to go with him, chose to learn from him, chose to stand with his people when soldiers attacked families." You can't mean that." Margaret's hand went to her throat. "Sarah, think what you're saying. They'll hang you for treason." "Then they'll hang me for seeing Apache as human beings." Margaret recoiled. "They're savages, murderers. They killed the Hendersons just last month. And soldiers killed Apache children last week. I saw it." Sarah gripped the bars. "Margaret, I used to think like you, but I've lived with them. They're people, families. They laugh and cry and bleed just like us. You've lost your mind." Margaret backed away. "That beast has corrupted you, but don't worry. Colonel Morrison has plans. They'll catch your Apache, hang him properly, and you'll get treatment. There are places for women who've been damaged." "What do you mean, catch him?" Margaret's smile was pitying. "Oh, my dear, they're using you as bait. Of course, word has spread that they have you. Your savage will come. They always do for their possessions. And when he does..." She made a hanging gesture. Ice filled Sarah's veins. "Get out! Sarah, get out!" Margaret fled, leaving Sarah alone with the terrible knowledge. She was bait in a trap. And knowing Karuk, knowing his sense of honor and growing feelings, he would walk right into it. That night, she heard commotion in the fort, shouts, running feet. Through her high window, she could see torches moving on the walls. Were they preparing for an attack? Had Karuk come already? The door burst open. Not guards. A young soldier she didn't recognize. Nervous and sweating. "Ma'am, you need to come with me. Quick now." Sarah hesitated. "Who sent you? Please, ma'am, there's no time." Something in his voice, not threat but urgency, made her follow. He led her through dark corridors, ducking when footsteps approached. At a side gate, he produced keys. "Why are you helping me?" The young man's face was troubled. "My sister married a Cherokee man back in Georgia. Army drove them west. She died on the trail. When I heard what they planned for you and your Apache..." He shook his head. "Just go. Horses tied outside. Ride hard and don't look back." Sarah gripped his hand briefly. "Thank you. Go." She slipped through the gate into the desert night. The promised horse waited. A sturdy mare with supplies tied to the saddle. Sarah mounted, kicked the horse into motion, heading for the mountains that loomed black against stars. Behind her, shouts erupted as her escape was discovered. But she was already galloping into darkness, dress whipping behind her, hair coming loose from its pins, free again, if only for the moment. She rode through the night, pushing the horse as hard as she dared. Dawn found her in familiar territory, the foothills where Karuk had taught her to read sign. She dismounted, letting the exhausted horse drink from a small spring. That's when she heard it, the soft whistle Karuk used to signal safety. Her heart leaped as he emerged from the rocks, a bandage around his head but moving with his usual grace. "Karuk!" She ran to him, and he caught her, holding tight. For a moment they just stood, confirming the other's reality. "How?" he asked into her hair. A soldier with conscience. But Kuruk, it's a trap. They expect you to come for me. They're waiting. I know. He pulled back to look at her. But could not leave you. You impossible man. Tears stung her eyes. We have to run. Far from here. Maybe Mexico. Sarah. His voice was gentle but firm. Running forever is no life. Not for you. Then what? He was quiet for a long moment. There is another way. Reservation at San Carlos. Apache there live under white law, but still Apache. Hard life, but life. Together life. If, he struggled with words, if you would be wife to Apache man, official, in white way and Apache way both. Sarah's breath caught. Are you asking? Asking you to choose hardest path. Reservation Apache are watched, controlled, poor, but legal. No more running, no more hiding. He touched her face. But must be what you want, not just escape, but choice. Sarah thought of the life he offered. No comfort, no respect from either world. Watched by authorities, scorned by whites, possibly rejected by Apache, but also belonging, purpose. The man she loved beside her, openly, legally. The reservation Apache? She said slowly. Do they need teachers, nurses, someone who could help them navigate white law while respecting Apache ways? Hope flickered in Kuruk's eyes. Yes, desperately. Then yes. She kissed him, soft and sure. Yes to all of it, to you, to your people who've become mine, to whatever life we can build between worlds. He held her close, and she felt him tremble slightly. This warrior who faced death without flinching shook at the gift of a future together. Will not be easy, he warned one more time. Nothing worth doing ever is. Sarah smiled through her tears. But together, we are stronger than apart. They mounted the horse together, Kuruk behind her, his arms steady around her as they rode. Behind them lay Fort Buchanan with its cells and certainties. Ahead lay San Carlos, a hard place, a compromise, but also possibility. The sun rose over the mountains, painting the desert in shades of gold and promise. Sarah McKenna, who had begun this journey as a proper widow with nothing left to lose, rode toward her new life as the future wife of an Apache warrior. Between worlds, perhaps, but no longer between lives. The path ahead would be difficult. Prejudice, poverty, the grinding weight of reservation life. But also love, purpose, the chance to build bridges between peoples who saw only enemies. It was enough. It was everything. They found shelter in the deep mountains, far from any trail the soldiers might follow. It was a hidden place Kuruk had known since boyhood, a box canyon with a spring-fed pool, ancient pines for shelter, and cave dwellings carved by people long vanished. Here, for a brief moment, the world's harsh realities couldn't reach them. Sarah's injuries from the escape had worsened. The rifle graze became infected, leaving her feverish and weak. Kuruk tended her with the same gentle patience she'd shown him, gathering herbs, cleaning wounds, holding her when chills racked her body. Stay with me, he whispered in the darkness when her fever peaked. Stay with me tonight and all nights after. She held to his voice like a lifeline, anchoring herself to this world when fever dreams tried to pull her under. In her delirium, she saw both their peoples, soldiers and Apache, Margaret's condemning face and the Apache mother clutching her baby, all the violence and prejudice that would keep them apart. But stronger than the nightmares was Kuruk's presence, his hands cooling her burning skin, his voice singing soft Apache prayers, his unwavering faith that she would survive, that they would survive. When the fever finally broke, Sarah woke to find him asleep beside her, exhaustion etched in every line of his face. She touched his cheek gently, overwhelmed by tenderness for this man who'd given up everything to stand beside her. His eyes opened, immediately alert. Then, seeing her clear gaze, his whole body relaxed. You return to me, always, she promised. They stayed in the canyon until Sarah regained strength. It was a stolen season outside of time, just the two of them, the land and the growing certainty of their bond. Kuruk taught her more Apache words. She told him stories of her childhood in Ohio, of green fields and rain. They planned quietly for a future that seemed both impossible and inevitable. But even paradise couldn't last. Their supplies ran low. Winter approached, and they both knew that hiding forever was no answer. San Carlos, Kuruk said one evening as they sat by their small fire. It is time. Sarah nodded. They'd discussed it throughout her recovery. The reservation was the only place they might live openly together, but it meant submission to white authority for him, life among people who might despise her for her. Are you certain this is what you want? She asked. You could disappear into Mexico, live free but alone, without purpose, without, he struggled for the English word, without meaning. My people suffer on reservation. Maybe together, we help. You know white ways. I know Apache ways. Between us, maybe bridge. A bridge between worlds, Sarah murmured. Built from two people who belong to neither. Built from love. Kuruk corrected, stronger than belonging. They left at dawn, carrying only essentials. The journey to San Carlos took 5 days of careful travel, avoiding patrols, skirting settlements. As they drew closer, the land grew harsher. This was where the government had pushed the Apache, onto ground no white man wanted. Their first view of San Carlos stole Sarah's breath, not from beauty, but from desolation. Adobe buildings baking in the sun, Apache people in mix of traditional dress and white man's clothes, moving with the listlessness of the defeated, soldiers everywhere. Watching. Kuruk's face was stone as they rode in. Sarah knew he was seeing his proud people reduced to this, dependent on government rations, forbidden from leaving, their children taken to white schools. They were stopped immediately by a cavalry patrol. The sergeant's eyes widened, recognizing them. Well, I'll be damned. Kuruk, the renegade, and the widow McKenna. His hand went to his pistol. Colonel's been looking for you two. We come in peace, Sarah said firmly. We wish to register at the agency, to live here legally. The sergeant laughed. Lady, you shot a soldier, and your Apache killed 3 bounty hunters. You think you can just waltz in? Those men attacked us. Sarah replied. We defended ourselves. Now we're surrendering voluntarily. Surely that counts for something. The soldiers escorted them to the agency building where Agent Clyde Broughton, a thin man with nervous hands, listened to their story with growing amazement. You want to marry this Apache? He kept blinking at Sarah. Legally? Ma'am, do you understand what you're saying? Perfectly. Kuruk and I wish to be married both in Apache custom and white law. I'll work as a teacher or nurse. He'll help keep peace between the agency and the Apache. We'll be productive residents. Productive? Broughton shuffled papers anxiously. Mrs. McKenna, no white woman has ever, the regulations don't even cover. Then we'll be the first. Sarah leaned forward. Mr. Broughton, you need interpreters. You need people who can help the Apache adjust while respecting their dignity. We can be valuable to you. Broughton looked between them, clearly overwhelmed. I'll have to wire Washington. This is unprecedented. While they waited for official response, they were given a small adobe house at the edge of the Apache section. Sarah expected hostility from both sides. What she found was more complex. Some Apache did eye her with suspicion or anger, a white woman who'd caused their people trouble. But others, particularly the women, showed cautious curiosity when they learned she spoke some Apache, had lived their ways, had stood with warriors against soldiers. The ice began to thaw. An elderly woman named Dakea became her first ally. You are the one who shot soldier to save Itza's baby, she said in broken English. Sarah remembered the mother fleeing with her child. She survived. Because of you. Dakea studied her shrewdly. You gave up your world for his? I found my world with his. The old woman nodded slowly. Then you are fool, but maybe holy fool. We shall see. The white officials were harder. They treated Sarah like she had a disease, speaking to her only when necessary. The white women at the agency, wives of soldiers and bureaucrats, were worse. They whispered behind hands, moved away when she approached, made sure she knew she was fallen. Contaminated, race traitor. It might have broken her once. Now it only strengthened her resolve. Word came from Washington: confusion, demands for clarification, but no outright refusal. While bureaucrats struggled with paperwork for a situation they'd never imagined. Sarah and Karuk began their work. She started teaching Apache children basic English, but unlike the agency school, she didn't forbid Apache words or punish traditional ways. Karuk translated between angry Apache men and frustrated agents, finding middle ground where none seemed to exist. Slowly, painfully, they built their bridge. 3 months after arriving, they were married twice in one day. First at dawn by Apache custom, Dakea officiating, blessing their union with ancient words, while a handful of Apache who'd accepted Sarah stood witness. Then at noon in the agency office, Broughton nervously reading from a law book while soldiers smirked and agency wives tutted their disapproval. That night, in their small adobe house, they sat together watching stars through the window. San Carlos was a hard place, a cage for the Apache spirit, but within its confines, they'd carved out something new. No regrets? Karuk asked, holding her close. Sarah thought of all she'd lost. Respectability, comfort, the easy certainty of belonging. Then she thought of all she'd gained. Purpose, truth, a love that transcended every barrier their worlds could build. Never, she said, and meant it. Outside, coyotes called to the moon. Inside, two people who'd found home in each other faced the uncertain future together. They were neither fully white nor Apache, neither completely accepted nor entirely rejected. They were something new, proof that even in the harshest ground, love could take root and grow. The fire burned low, casting dancing shadows on adobe walls. Sarah thought of another fire, the one that had destroyed her old life and led her to this moment. That woman who'd stood in the ashes could never have imagined this. Married to an Apache warrior, teaching mixed-blood children, building bridges word by word and deed by deed. But that woman had been afraid. This one, hardened by desert and softened by love, was not. "Stay with me tonight," Karuk whispered, echoing the words that had started her transformation. Tonight and always. Sarah replied, and in the silence that followed, filled with promise and challenge both, their new life began in earnest. Not the life either had planned, but the one they'd chosen together. It was enough. It was everything. In the distance, drums began, illegal but unstoppable, the heartbeat of a people who refused to die. Sarah listened and felt her own heart match their rhythm. Between worlds, perhaps, but finally, truly, home. Thank you for listening to this tale from the Wild West, where love bloomed between two souls from different worlds. Where are you listening to this story from? Please share in the comments below. I'd love to connect with listeners from around the globe. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel for more authentic frontier stories. And share your thoughts about Sarah and Karuk's journey. Your comments inspire us to keep bringing these powerful tales of the American frontier to life.